Let's focus on children's lively minds from Chapter 4. Do adults facilitate and support learning for children, or do they get in the way? In some ways, young children are actually smarter, more imaginative, more caring, and more conscious than adults are. This is a quote from Alison Gopnik, who wrote The Child as a Scientist. A child's drive to learn is as strong as their drive to eat, but adults often get in the way. First, they might take an original sin perspective, and that original sin has to do with the religious perspective related to Adam and Eve, and that given a chance, humans will pick the inappropriate choice, as Adam and Eve did, and the rest of us have been, that original sin has been placed on us from that perspective. With an original sin perspective, the adult takes a focus on inappropriate behavior and punishing that behavior as a way of teaching appropriate behavior, when actually that doesn't work very well, because often they don't even end up talking about what's appropriate, just focus on what is inappropriate. And that punishment related to the original sin perspective results in negative relationships between the adult and the child. They don't gain information about what is appropriate behavior, and often even if they do behave appropriately, they're not acknowledged for that or reinforced for that. And reinforcement is a more appropriate way of approaching developing the social skills we want children to develop, because we're focusing on what they should be doing. Another way that adults get in the way is focusing on academics and school readiness. And academics are really isolated skills focused on memorization and drill and practice. And when you talk about Bloom's taxonomy, which is one of our application assignments, and we look at those levels of learning, those 6 levels of learning that start with remembering and go all the way up to creating, academics really focuses on the lowest level of learning, developing those isolated skills and memorizing things. And unfortunately, a lot of times in school, we stop there instead of moving up the levels of learning. We also dismiss active exploration and discovery and view it as being messy, risky, and intense. So too much energy, too much noise, and the children should really be doing something productive. All of that adult behavior gets in the way of children's learning and intellectual development. The role of adults is to see, further, and facilitate children's built-in or intuitive intellectual pursuits. Intellectual is very different than academic. Intellectual is studying objects, reflecting on what is learned from that study, and speculating possibilities involving and utilizing creativity, which, remember, that's the highest level of learning. We should provide lots of open-ended opportunities, open-ended materials, open-ended time schedules, open-ended questions, open-ended conversations, so that the children can be intellectual. And then observe what the children are doing and wait to determine what they are thinking. So don't rush into your reactions or your approaches with the children. So children's capacity to learn is astounding. They have built-in curiosity that's insatiable. It's intuitive. They have very flexible brains that are plastic and can adapt and reshape. When a child may have a brain injury, their brain is much more able to compensate for injuries in different areas of the brain. And and that's an example of how plastic their brain is. They observe everything very closely and notice all the details. And again, that's part of that intellectuality. And they utilize the scientific method without having to be taught what it is. They naturally do it. They ask why questions. And then when they have that why question, they collect information to find out what the answer is. They explore, they investigate, they sort, they classify. And as they do that, they formulate a reason why. And the technical term that's related to scientific method in regard to that reason is called, they formulate a hypothesis. Then they test their hypothesis or reason over and over until they find the answer. Let's take a look at an example of this on page 63 of chapter 4, Organizing Cups. Olivia approached the table of cups and sparkly objects with a serious look on her face and got to work. First, she lined up cups into 2 rows and then placed a diamond on in each of the cups. She said earnestly, "Looks like ice." Next, she removed the diamonds and placed a small letter in each cup. Then she stacked the cups carefully in her arms and ventured around the room, collecting more cups as she went along. After a short while, she brought the cups back to the table, where she lined up the shortest cup first and filled them with different shapes. Next, she lined up the larger cups and filled them halfway up with letters. She spotted more empty cups across the table and added them to her line, putting letters in those cups as well. Her face lit up with excitement when she took a step back to look at what she had accomplished. So again, she's testing her reasoning over and over, and as she's doing that, building on what she's learning intellectually. So a real crucial concept that we need to keep in mind in regards to this capacity to learn is that play is the context of intellectual learning. So it's how intellectual learning happens. So it's not a waste of time, and it's not just children's work, it's intellectual. So let's take a look at 2 different theories in regards to play. There's Parton's play stages, and something we need to keep in mind about Parton is that these are developmental, so they'll show up according to age, but that doesn't mean they disappear. And so that's something to keep in mind. Even though a child has achieved the highest level of these play stages, they'll still participate in some of the lower steps and levels. So the first one is uninvolved, and that's just involved with the child's involved with their own thought. Onlooker play is watching others play, and they might do that for various reasons, because they want to study what's happening to decide whether they want to play, or maybe they don't know how to approach and they're gaining information so that they can ask if they can play. Solitary play is playing by themselves. Parallel play is playing by themselves, but they're next to other people. They're not cooperating or talking, they're just next to each other. Associative play is playing with others, and then the highest level is cooperative play, according to Parton, where they're planning and assigning roles in play. Our last play theory we're going to talk about is Piaget's play stages. And the same thing applies with Piaget's stages. These are developmental and show up according to age, but that doesn't mean the previous stages go away. So functional play is simple and repetitive. It's something that they do over and over until they develop the skill to accomplish it effectively. Constructive play, and sometimes, by the way, functional play is called sensory motor play. Constructive play is it's functional, but adding the goal-oriented aspect of it. So the child has some sort of task or end goal they want to accomplish. Dramatic play is pretending. Often they're pretending to do something that grown-ups do. Sociodramatic play is doing that dramatic play involving others and working out roles, deciding what you're going to say and do. And dramatic play begins in toddlerhood and becomes really involved in preschool age children. Games with rules is the highest level, but something we have to keep in mind about this is that this does not start happening in the traditional way adults view it, where they're truly following a set of rules and they accept that someone is the winner. Doesn't happen until children are in concrete operations, which happens starting age 7 or 2nd grade. And so if you play games with rules and you have winners, pre-operational thinkers and children in 1st grade and younger, they don't deal with that very well because they're not cognitively ready. So game with rules is being able to follow predetermined rules and accept that they won't always win. So we can still do similar things. For example, Simon Says is a game where you're out if you're not following the rules. And so there are winners and losers in that, so that wouldn't be age appropriate for preschool children. But you could play Follow the Leader, which is the same kind of thing, and with Follow the Leader, there's not a set of rules, and there's not winners and losers.